The cost of being reckless? In Hubei, a female tourist picked some corn from a local villager's field and was stopped by the villager, who demanded 500 renminbi in compensation. The female tourist said, "I already apologized and am willing to pay for it, but asking for 500 renminbi is extortion." The villager responded, "500 renminbi is a fine, not the price of the corn. Stealing and buying are two different things." Netizens commented, "Can I rob a bank, apologize after getting caught, and everything will be fine?" On a sunny afternoon, the female tourist, accompanied by her child, visited a golden cornfield. The child, excited, ran along the paths, curiously observing everything around. They saw rows of neat corn stalks, each adorned with large ears of corn. The child pointed at an especially large ear of corn, eyes full of anticipation. The female tourist smiled, walked over, gently touched the corn, and carefully snapped it off the stalk. She handed the corn to her child, whose face immediately lit up with a bright smile, as if they had received the most precious gift in the world. But the next second, this heartwarming moment was abruptly interrupted. An elderly villager passing by saw this and shouted, "What are you doing? Who allowed you to pick the corn?" The female tourist was startled and quickly apologized, saying, "Sorry, the child wanted it, so I picked one. How much does it cost? I can pay for it." But the elderly woman said, "You picked the corn without permission, so compensate 500 renminbi." The female tourist was shocked and said, 500 renminbi for one ear of corn? That's robbery." The elderly woman said, "Who told you to pick someone else's corn without permission? The 500 renminbi is a punitive compensation. Don't move. I'll call the owner of the cornfield." The female tourist then realized that the cornfield didn't belong to the elderly woman and said, "When the owner comes, I'll call the police. Let's have the police decide the compensation, okay?" At this moment, a passerby asked what had happened. The woman, full of anger, said, "I picked her corn. I apologized, and then I said I'd pay for it. But she wants me to compensate 500 renminbi." The elderly woman said, "I'm not the one asking for that much money. If everyone could just apologize after picking the corn, then how would we grow corn?" The female tourist said, "At the very least, you should have a price for what you're selling, right?" The elderly woman said, "You're not buying it, you're compensating for damaging it." But the woman believed that since she had apologized and was willing to pay for the corn, the elderly woman was extorting her by demanding an outrageous amount. However, the elderly woman saw this as a punishment for the tourist's actions, not a normal transaction. This incident sparked a heated discussion online. Some netizens said, "If you see someone, you offer to pay. If no one sees, you run away." Sigh. Stealing others' things with such confidence, I can't believe it. The 2 renminbi is for the corn, and the 498 renminbi is the cost of being reckless. You shouldn't do such things with children. Other netizens said, "It's definitely wrong to pick the corn without permission, but asking for 500 renminbi is too much. An acre of land doesn't even earn 500 renminbi. This is obviously extortion. Since the corn wasn't hers, what right does she have to find someone 500 renminbi?" Some netizens also said, "It's someone else's property, and if you pick it without permission, it's stealing. Stealing is punishable. Can city people pick things in the countryside, and can country people just take things in the city?" The female tourist's actions violated the cornfield owner's property rights. While enjoying the natural beauty, we should also respect others' labor and property rights. Legally speaking, the female tourist's behavior already constitutes theft. If the cornfield owner pursues the matter, the tourist could face administrative detention. However, the elderly woman is not a law enforcement officer and has no right to demand 500 renminbi in compensation from the woman. Compensation should be based on reasonable market prices. However, if the police get involved, the tourist will likely be at a disadvantage. So, whether to settle privately is up to the tourist to decide. So, what do you think about this incident? In addition to the above incident, there are other instances of uncivilized behavior by tourists. On June 20th of this year, in Hebei, Hunan, a tour guide led 55 tourists to visit a traditional ancient village. During the trip, Some tourists couldn't resist picking a few Tuna sinensis sprouts they saw on the roadside, but were stopped by the villagers, who demanded 500 renminbi for each sprout. The tourists said, "Is this gold or silver?" The village chief responded, "Picking without permission is stealing." It turns out that the villagers in this village had planted many tuna trees, and when the tuna sprouts matured, they would sell them for money. However, the tourists, finding them novel, decided to pick a few to take home. As the tourists were picking, several villagers watched quietly. When the tourists were about to leave, the villagers stopped them, saying they had illegally picked the tuna sprouts and, according to the rules, would be fined 500 renminbi for each sprout. The tourists were stunned. A fine of 500 renminbi per sprout? Is this gold or silver? And why didn't you warn us not to pick them when you were clearly watching? But the villagers said these trees were painstakingly cultivated, and picking them without permission meant you had to pay a fine, or you wouldn't be allowed to leave. The tour guide argued on behalf of the tourists, saying they picked most of the wild Tuna sinensis by the roadside and only 2 or 3 sprouts from your field, and charging 500 renminbi per sprout was excessive since they are usually sold by weight. But the villagers didn't budge, and even the village chief couldn't help. The tourists felt this was extortion and had to call the police. After 2 hours of police mediation, they were finally allowed to leave after compensating 260 renminbi, but the 55 tourists had their schedule delayed by 2 hours. Feeling indignant, the tourists posted about this incident online, where netizens criticized the villagers for being petty, asking who would dare to visit in the future. In response, the village chief said, although the villagers didn't give a warning at the time, the village had hung banners prohibiting picking. Picking without permission is stealing. Nobody said each sprout costs 500 renminbi. The village's rule is a 10 renminbi fine per illegally picked sprout. If you pick without the owner's consent, it's considered theft. These are seasonal products, and a kilo sells for 30 to 40 renminbi. The villagers rely on this for income, and if each tourist picks a few, how will they make money? It's not easy for the villagers to grow crops. You bring a tour group here to visit, and we warmly welcome you. But if you engage in such behavior that harms the villagers' interests, I'm firmly opposed. This incident sparked a heated debate. Some netizens said, I side with the villagers. They put up signs prohibiting picking, but the tourists still did it. It's theft. How can a thief have any justification? Others said, it's clearly a trap. They saw the tourists picking but didn't say anything, and after they finished, they demanded money. This earns more than selling the tuna sprouts. If the compensation were reasonable, it would be understandable, but such a high demand amounts to extortion. Avoid such places. It shows the village has a poor moral climate. Yet some netizens argued, although there were signs, tourists might not notice them. If the villagers were present and didn't stop the picking but waited until after to demand compensation, that's not fair. Legally speaking, does this constitute theft? In my opinion, there is insufficient evidence to determine theft. Theft is defined as secretly taking someone else's property with the intent to illegally possess it. The tour guide and tourists believed the sprouts were wild, and the villagers didn't say anything while they were picking them, so they assumed it was okay to pick. Of course, the lack of evidence for theft doesn't mean the tourists didn't cause harm to the villagers. According to Article 1165 of the Civil Code, anyone who causes civil harm to another must bear responsibility. So, if the villagers can prove that the trees were theirs, the tourists should compensate them for their losses. However, compensation should be based on a reasonable market price, not an exorbitant 500 renminbi per sprout. In fact, both sides made mistakes in this case. If the villagers had said a little more, and if the tourists had asked a little more, this situation could have been avoided. When visiting a place, one should still behave civilly. Regardless of whether something is wild or not, don't randomly pick or take things. After all, the scenery is meant to be appreciated, not destroyed. On June 23rd, in Shijiazhuang, Hebei, a tourist brought a child to a scenic spot to see the popular bar-headed goose dabao, only to end up kicking the goose to death. The tourist insisted that it was because the goose scared the child that they kicked it, but the person filming angrily retorted, "The child is on your back. The goose didn't attack the child. So why did you kick it so hard?" Now, here's the question. The bar-headed goose is a first-class protected animal. So does the tourist need to bear criminal responsibility? It is reported that this scenic spot attracts tourists by showcasing the geese, allowing them to interact directly with the birds and even feed them. Among them, a goose named Dabao is the little star of the area, beloved by many visitors. Dabao is not afraid of people and occasionally flaps its wings and suddenly rushes towards tourists, which indeed might startle timid visitors, but Dabao has never actively attacked anyone. That day, the tourist brought their child to see Dabao. When Dabao rushed towards them, the child got scared, and the adult nearby kicked Dabao hard, resulting in Dabao lying motionless. The person filming questioned them, asking why they kicked Dabao. The child's sister said, "It scared my little sister, and it threatened her." The person filming said, "It wasn't a threat. How could it be a threat?" The child's sister said, "It caused fear in my sister." The child's father said, "It scared the child." The person filming said, "How did it scare her when the child was on your back?" Unexpectedly, the child's father started swearing. The video ends there, and the person filming called the police. The police are currently investigating the incident. The person filming said, based on previous encounters, Dabao probably rushed towards the tourists and stopped without attacking, only to be kicked away. Upon examination, it was found that Dabao had a second cervical vertebra fracture and ultimately died. This incident sparked heated discussions online. Some netizens said, "If a goose flew into your home and scared your child, that would be the goose's fault. But you brought your child to the goose's home and then said your child got scared. Isn't that a bit unreasonable? Moreover, children can be scared by many things. Would you kick a tiger to death if it scared your child at the zoo?" Other netizens said, "Compared to animals, humans are undoubtedly more important. But if you're worried that an animal might hurt your child, you shouldn't take them to the zoo. Human lives are certainly important, but does that mean animal lives aren't? If your child encounters unfriendly people in this world, would you try to eliminate them all?" Another group of netizens commented, "Why are cats, dogs, and birds now more valuable than people? If you ask me, not only should the bird be killed, but the scenic spot should be sued." Firstly, as a father, I wouldn't bring a child so close to the animal. From this perspective, the guardian bears the primary responsibility. Secondly, if an animal approaches, the instinct should be to protect the child, not to harm the animal. For instance, if it were a hunting dog, you wouldn't be able to kill it with one kick. You would stand in front of the child to protect them. Moreover, scaring a child and attacking a child are two different things. If it had attacked the child, I would support the parent's actions, but if it only scared the child, I support punishment. Based on the descriptions from both sides, if the goose didn't actively attack, then it's not considered a situation of self-defense. There was no immediate danger to life, and the adult was still holding the child. So the person who kicked the goose is likely to face punishment. Because the bird that was kicked to death was a bar-headed goose, a first-class protected animal in China, if someone illegally hunts or kills it, they can be charged with the crime of endangering precious and endangered wildlife, which generally carries a sentence of up to 5 years in prison or detention, along with a fine. For more serious cases, the sentence can be between 5 and 10 years in prison, along with a fine. For particularly severe cases, the sentence can exceed 10 years, along with a fine or confiscation of property. The child was scared and could have simply run away, but claiming it was to protect the child is just a bad excuse. Most people wouldn't have the heart to do such a thing. So, what do you think about this incident? In recent years, as the tourism industry has become increasingly popular, similar incidents have frequently occurred. But I still want to say this fairly. Not all Chinese people are like this. So why do some foreigners have a bad impression of Chinese tourists? The main reason is the actions of these few bad apples. Having lived in China for many years, I know that most Chinese people are actually very civilized and well-mannered. China is vast, with a population of 1.4 billion. Every country has people with lower standards of behavior, but due to the sheer size of the population, such incidents are more likely to occur. I believe that the issue of uncivilized behavior among tourists may be due to China's rapid development. Some people, although they have become wealthy, have not kept up with their manners. Therefore, I hope that Chinese compatriots will strive to be civilized tourists when traveling. More than a decade ago, Many Chinese tourists behave loudly and uncivilized abroad, leaving a very bad impression on foreigners. In recent years, with the increase in Chinese consumer power, Chinese tourists have become more popular worldwide, but this does not mean that all foreigners' views on Chinese people have changed. Moreover, in the era of short videos, any uncivilized behavior can easily be recorded and spread. If such behavior is widely disseminated, it could seriously impact the image of Chinese people. I hope that Chinese compatriots will maintain civilized behavior while traveling.